The battle for Raven 6 was already being called a disaster. Coalition forces were outgunned, outmaneuvered, and embarrassingly out-choreographed by the mechanized Van Dominion, a race of 7-foot-tall insectoids with neural link combat routines and zero appreciation for rhythm. For 3 days straight, the Coalition had tried everything: flanking maneuvers, orbital strikes, diplomacy. One ambassador even offered free coupons to Earth's finest coffee chain. Nothing worked. The Van swept across trenches like an angry tide of clicking limbs and precision plasma fire. Entire battalions were forced to retreat into the crumbling canyons of Sector Delta 5. No one was smiling. No one was winning. Until a human did something stupid. "Are we dead yet?" Private Eli Banner asked, flattening himself against a boulder as laser fire screeched past. "Almost," Corporal Jane growled. "We're about 2 minutes from getting steamrolled." "Cool," Eli muttered, adjusting the strap on his helmet. "Mind if I try something first?" Jane blinked at him. "If it's another grenade-juggling trick—" No, Eli said, pulling out a data chip from his pocket and jamming it into his comms unit. "This is something older." "Eli, whatever you're thinking, don't." Too late. And then it happened. Across Coalition frequencies, meant strictly for tactical communication, came a deep, guttural riff. Electric, primitive, loud. "Back in black. I hit the sack." Jane's head tilted. "What the hell is that?" "Music. Is that screaming?" "Number. That's just the singer's voice." Jane squinted at him. "Why does it feel like I'm suddenly angrier?" Eli grinned. "Because this," he said, standing up as plasma fire rained down, "is AC/DC. At Coalition Command, chaos erupted. "Who hacked our comms?" an Andaran officer barked, tentacles slapping at controls. "Unknown," his aide replied, "but we're receiving a Class 3 Earth audio transmission, something labeled high-voltage war mix." On every frontline frequency, the same thing played. "Yes, I'm let loose, from the noose." Commanders tried to shut it off. Couldn't. The song was embedded into the transmission net, repeating, looping, gaining volume. And the troops. They weren't retreating anymore. General Zala of the Van leaned forward in her observation pod. "What? Is that noise?" she hissed. Her AI translated the waveform. "Unknown auditory weapon. It contains harmonic aggression, rhythmic defiance, and lyrical mockery." "Mockery?" "Reference. Forget the hearse, 'cause I never die." Zala's mandibles clicked. "Is it a threat?" "Unclear. But morale among enemy forces is rising." "Shut it down." "We can't. It's contagious." Private Eli Banner charged. He wasn't the only one. Across the canyon, human troops rose to their feet, singing, shouting, screaming lyrics they barely remembered, but somehow knew deep in their bones. Even the non-humans joined in. A Grell medic tried to harmonize. A Thurn heavy infantry soldier began headbanging so hard his helmet cracked. "What is this madness?" someone yelled. "It's not madness," Eli said between blasts. "It's rock and roll." They pushed forward, to the beat, to the sound of Earth's ancient rage. The Van, so perfect in formation, so confident in silence, suddenly stumbled. Because how do you fight an army screaming, "I'm on the highway to hell," with gleeful defiance? You don't. You panic. You run. Or worse, you start tapping your feet. In the aftermath, the battlefield fell eerily quiet, except for the music still echoing from discarded helmets and comms units. Eli Banner stood on a ridge, burnt, bruised, grinning like an idiot. A drone hovered over him, broadcasting live to every Coalition fleet. He looked right into the lens and said, "That was our warm-up." Behind him, a human unit began to chant, "T.N.T, I'm dynamite." The feed cut, but the message delivered. Earth had a war anthem, and now the galaxy knew. "Explain this." Admiral Korveth of the Shah Federation stared at the playback screen in the Coalition war room. It showed a ragged unit of human soldiers advancing through smoke, singing, no, shouting, something about dynamite while plasma bolts exploded around them. The footage paused on a shot of Private Eli Banner pumping his fist, bloodied, grinning, screaming into the sky as T.N.T. blasted across the battlefield. General Nornak of the Coalition Military Council cleared his throat. "That's a C/DC, an Earth band." Korveth narrowed his eyes. "It's a military chant?" "Technically, it's a cultural artifact," Nornak said. "But in practice, yes, that's war music." There was a long silence. Then Korveth growled, "Why weren't we told humans had a sonic weaponized morale vector?" Nornak adjusted his uniform. "To be fair, we didn't know it still worked." The phenomenon spread faster than any official directive. Troops began requesting battle music authorizations. Commanders received files labeled Blood Pumpers, Human Edition, a database of Earth war songs, thousands of years old, mostly guitar-based, began circulating unofficially through military comms. The top 3 most requested? Back in Black T.N.T., Thunderstruck alien technicians tried to understand the appeal. They ran waveform analyses, emotional impact breakdowns, even attempted translation of the lyrics. "Don't need reason, don't need rhyme," an AI translator read aloud. "Subject proclaims intent to defy logic and physics." The AI paused. "Humans have made this doctrine?" On Ravon 6, the battlefield became an Earth concert with plasma weapons. Every charge began with a song. Wounded soldiers crawled to speakers, clutching comm units like relics, whispering, "Play it again." The music didn't make them bulletproof. It just made them get back up anyway. When one unit was cut off behind enemy lines, the commander sent a single message to headquarters. Low on ammo, high on AC/DC. They held out for 3 more hours. The Varn Dominion called an emergency war council. Across 6 systems, their hive commanders debated countermeasures. The sound pattern is non-lethal, yet causes functional destabilization. It disrupts our formations, makes the enemy fight erratically, with enthusiasm. It triggers unpredictable variables. An elder Varn leaned forward. "What is the song's purpose?" After a long pause, the AI offered a translation. "To raise hell." The Varn fell silent, then issued Directive V null. "Suppress human audio artifacts. Terminate source of war anthem." They called it a soundstrike protocol. It would be their undoing. Private Eli Banner was pulled from the front lines. Command called him a walking incident. They meant it as a compliment. "You're lucky we didn't court-martial you," the officer said. "You hijacked the ComNet, broke 3 communication protocols, and triggered an entire interspecies morale rebellion." Eli sipped a juice pouch. "You're welcome. You're also being reassigned." He blinked. "Wait, what?" "You're going on a morale tour." The concept was simple. Drop Eli into the worst hotspots of the war, let him blast Earth's loudest music, and watch morale rise like caffeine in a rookie's bloodstream. The reality? Chaos. On Dravik 2, he played Highway to Hell during a retreat. The troops turned around and charged. On Pier Delta, they were down to knives. He played Shoot to Thrill. The squad fought for another 7 hours and took the outpost. On Grek Station, alien medics began prescribing 2 minutes of Thunderstruck before surgeries. Someone coined the term sound shock doctrine. Even Coalition top brass began asking for the playlist. Eli called it the war tape. Kayla, who'd been reassigned as his communications handler, just called it madness with rhythm. But then the Varn struck back. At Outpost 09, they launched a precision orbital blast at the human comm towers, targeting the signal relay carrying Earth audio. It worked. The battlefield went quiet. For the first time in weeks, no music, no rhythm, no singing. The humans froze. The Allies hesitated. The tide turned again, this time against them. Eli sat behind a damaged console, covered in ash, his earpiece silent. Kayla turned to him. "They cut us off." He nodded, then reached into his vest, pulled out an ancient dented device, a tape player. "No," she whispered. "Oh, yes." He slammed the cassette in. The gears clicked, static. Then, thunder, thunder, thunder. The bass dropped. Eli grabbed a speaker unit, held it up like a war horn, and screamed into the open field. "Thunderstruck!" The comms flared, signal overloaded. The battlefield shook. The war anthem was back. And this time, it was personal. Outpost 09 erupted in chaos. But this time, it wasn't panic. It was volume. The moment Thunderstruck blasted through the makeshift battlefield speakers, something changed. Soldiers with shattered morale stood up. Alien allies, bloodied, outnumbered, raised weapons with new fury. Even a wounded Thurn berserker let out a howl that shattered his own face shield. It wasn't just noise anymore. It was revenge. The Varn had tried to silence the sound. Instead, they gave it meaning. Private Eli Banner was on top of a scorched wreck, holding up the speaker like a warrior priest in the middle of the apocalypse. His eyes were bloodshot, his armor scorched, his tape deck smoking, but he was grinning like he'd just kicked a god in the teeth. Kayla ducked beside him, dodging a bolt. "The signal's unstable." "Then turn it up." She jabbed the volume dial with her elbow. The ground shook. "You've been thunderstruck." The front lines surged. Varn soldiers, regimented and hive-bound, tried to reform. They couldn't. Their lines broke every time the bass dropped. Their formations fractured when the chorus hit. Across the ridge, a coalition sniper synchronized shots with the guitar riff. A tank gunner timed his salvo to the drums. Somewhere in the chaos, a Grell shock trooper started slam dancing with a tree. In orbit, coalition reinforcements caught the audio feed and reclassified the battlefield. Moral overload zone, active sonic catalyst present, engage at will. Commanders stopped issuing orders. They just said, "Follow the music." Admiral Texar watched in disbelief from the command cruiser. "Are they charging into artillery fire?" Nornak checked his datapad. "Yes, in tempo, but why?" "Because that," he said, nodding toward the sound waves echoing across the planet, "isn't just music. That's Earth defiance, packaged, amplified, played at full blast." Texar stared, then muttered, "Remind me never to ask what 'let there be rock' means." The Varn tried again. This time they jammed coalition frequencies with white noise. It didn't work. Eli had already hardwired backup speakers across the ridge. Old Earth hardware, analog, unjammable. He hit play on the next track, a slow, dark, rising guitar. Hell's bells. The clouds rumbled in sync. The battlefield fell into a rhythm, one forged in rage and guitars. The humans moved like they'd been trained by thunder. The Varn were methodical, efficient, but their fear of unpredictability made them vulnerable to every note. They couldn't calculate emotion. They couldn't quantify swagger. And AC/DC had enough of both to start a war from scratch. By nightfall, the battlefield belonged to the coalition again. Bodies smoldered, craters smoked, and the remnants of Varn warbands crawled away, twitching at the sound of distant riffs still echoing across the valley. They left behind everything: weapons, equipment, dignity. Because for the first time in their long, unbroken war history, they'd been beaten not by strategy, but by sound. Command logged the incident under a new designation: Auditory Psychological Overload, Class Human. Later, as cleanup began, Kayla sat beside Eli in the ruins of their forward command tent. The tape deck was in pieces, the speakers fried, but the mission was done. "You're going to get a medal," she muttered, pulling bandages from her kit. Eli shrugged. "Nah, they'll just ban music next time." "They're already trying," she smirked, showing him a memo. "New directive: unregulated Earth audio to be monitored for combat influence." He laughed. "So they're scared." "No," Kayla said, taping a burn on his arm. "They're terrified." On the Varn homeworld, a meeting of war tacticians studied the footage. One paused the feed. A human soldier, carrying another on his back, blood pouring from his brow, screaming a line in sync with the song, "I'm rolling thunder, pouring rain." The room went silent. One tactician whispered, "What if it's not the weapons we should fear?" Another replied, "Then what?" The first one closed the file. The playlist. 3 days after the Battle of 09, Earth's music was no longer just a rallying cry. It was a weapon. The coalition didn't even bother pretending anymore. Every dropship now came with its own sound deck. Every unit carried pre-approved battle bangers, curated by Private Eli Banner, now known across the network as DJ Doom. Even the logistics team got in on it. A resupply shuttle entered orbit playing "If You Want Blood, You Got It," prompting the defending battalion to launch a surprise counter-offensive before the shuttle even landed. They won. To the beat. Eli Banner, to his growing horror, had become a brand. Posters of him screaming into a headset circulated in field hospitals. Someone made a combat helmet with built-in speakers called the Thunderhead trademark. There were stickers, fan edits, and, worse, 2 alien musicians released a dubstep remix of T.N.T. Eli begged Kayla to delete it. She played it on loop for 2 days, just to watch him squirm. "This is punishment," he muttered, wrapping speaker wire around a tree for another forward soundpost. "No," she replied, "this is consequence." Then came the council summons. Not military, political. The Galactic Alliance wanted to speak. Rumors spread like smoke in an ammo dump. Earth had crossed a line. Earth had hijacked military protocol. Earth had introduced unregulated morale surges into Allied operations. And above all, Earth had scared the Varn into a strategic retreat. That had never happened before. Ever. Now the council wanted answers, and Eli was told, "Wear something nice." The hall was massive, tiers of seats, glowing insignias, high-ranking officials from 57 species watching like angry birds of prey. And in the center, standing in borrowed armor with scuffed boots and one working speaker clipped to his chest, stood Eli. "Private Banner," a Yalan delegate began, "you broadcast emotionally aggressive frequencies on open military comms." "Yes." "You disrupted command structures." "Yes." "You caused enemy collapse through unregulated sonic conditioning." "Thank you?" A low murmur passed through the hall. The chair representative from the Krell Intergalactic Concord leaned forward. "What exactly is this Earth music?" Eli scratched his neck. "We call it rock." "Is it weaponized?" We just listen to it when we're pissed off." More murmurs. "Then why did it make your forces fight harder?" Eli hesitated, then smiled. "Because it reminds us of who we are. Loud, stupid, angry, but impossible to kill." Silence. Then a single Thurn diplomat whispered, "Metal." Eli pointed at him. "Exactly." Despite warnings, sanctions, and 3 official cease-and-listen letters, humans kept broadcasting. Because the war wasn't over, and the enemy wasn't giving up. The Varn adapted. They sent out new drones, ones that jammed frequencies. The first engagement was brutal. No music, no rhythm. Troops stalled, morale dipped. Eli knew what was happening before the first report hit command. "They're trying to shut us up," he growled. Kayla slammed her console. "They're not just jamming sound, they're jamming soul." He nodded, then walked to the storage bay, pulled out a crate marked Earth Analog Emergency Reserves. Inside, a turntable, a speaker, a vinyl labeled AC/DC, live. He held it up like a priest holding sacred scripture. "We're going old school." The next battle was unbroadcasted, undocumented, but everyone remembered what happened. A ridge in Sector 12, overrun. Human and Allied forces scattered. Then, feedback, raw, unfiltered, analog. The riff hit. "It's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll." Soldiers stopped running. So did the Varn. One even flinched. And then the impossible happened. A second wave of troops, hearing the music from across the valley, turned around. Voluntarily. They fought uphill, screaming lyrics, launching themselves into the enemy like possessed madmen. One even attacked with a bass guitar he claimed he found and spiritually bonded with. The ridge was retaken in 11 minutes. The Varn command issued an internal memo. The human problem is no longer tactical. It is cultural. Their analysts wrote a new term, cacophonic morale assault. Definition: the use of emotionally volatile audio to create irrational battlefield superiority. Recommendation: avoid all engagement during human musical transmissions. Back on base, Eli was listening to vinyl, alone, until Kayla entered with a datapad. "Orders," she said, tossing it. He glanced at the screen. "Requested for final assault on Varn capital. Bring sound." He raised a brow. That's it? That's it. He smiled. Then let's make them hear us. The Varn homeworld was a fortress. 10 defense rings, orbital mines, automated strike grids, a fleet so vast it had to stagger its own launches to avoid colliding with itself. For centuries, no enemy had even reached its upper atmosphere. That was about to change, because this time the enemy was carrying a 5,000-watt amp system and no intention of staying quiet. The Coalition War Council had planned the assault for months, every fleet primed, every angle calculated. Then someone asked the obvious, what if the humans go first? It wasn't strategy, it was instinct. You don't tell the storm where to hit, you just aim it. So they aimed Eli Banner and let him loose. The flagship Thunderchild exited FTL in reverse. It wasn't a maneuver, it was a message. At its helm, Eli sat in a repurposed concert seat, flanked by base cannons, subwoofer batteries, and a custom rig named The Wall, a sonic array that could be heard from orbit to crust. On his left, Kayla, now upgraded from communications officer to sound engineer of mass defiance. Her finger hovered over the ignition switch of the main amp. "You sure about this?" she asked. Eli smiled. "Let's wake the neighbors." She flipped the switch. The first chord hit like a comet. "For those about to rock, fire!" The sound cracked through vacuum like a god's shout. Across every coalition ship, systems lit up. Morale readings spiked, heart rates surged. The Thunderchild dropped toward the planet, trailing flame, surrounded by sonic shockwaves. The Varn fleet moved to intercept. Too late. The music was already inside. On the ground, Varn soldiers fell back, clutching their heads. Not from pain, from recognition. They'd heard this before. On Ravon 6, at 09. They had survived it. They remembered. And that memory, of humans rising, fists raised, shouting lyrics while bleeding out, shook them deeper than any weapon. It wasn't strategy. It was defiance given rhythm. And it scared them. Because you can't break what rocks. Eli's voice crackled across the comms. To every trooper listening, the speakers are live, the bass is loaded, and your boots are made for stomping. Kayla added, "This one's for morale. For payback. For every friend you lost before the first chorus hit." They both shouted into the channel, "Let there be rock." What followed wasn't a battle. It was a concert of carnage. Every beat matched a barrage. Every riff launched a retaliation. Humans danced between blasts. Aliens roared lyrics. An amphibious medic crowd-surfed over wreckage. The Varn collapsed. Not from lack of numbers, from lack of will. Because for all their technology, all their discipline, all their might, they had no answer for rhythm, no defense against madness in 4-4 time. Hours later, the capital was silent. Eli stood in the ashes of the Varn command center, holding the last vinyl record above his head as it spun out its final track. "Rock and roll ain't noise pollution," he grinned. Behind him, Kayla pulled off her headset. "That's it then," she said. "They're done." He nodded slowly. That was the final track. Was it worth it? He looked around, to the broken towers, the smoldering sky, to the dozens of flags, coalition, alien, human, all waving together beneath the echo of thunder. "Yeah," he said, "because now they know." Kayla cocked her head. "Know what?" Eli looked straight at her. "That when humans go to war, we bring our soundtrack." The Varn signed their surrender in silence, until one general leaned across the table and whispered, "Will you give us the playlist?" Eli smirked. Volume 1. In the decades that followed, human war music became interstellar legend. Training simulations began with power chords, diplomatic envoys carried remastered vinyl, and among alien soldiers there was a saying whispered before battle, "If you hear thunder, run." The end